Council meeting. Welcome back. Our first meeting since the summer. I'd like to begin by just acknowledging that we are holding our meeting here today on the traditional territory of the Qayqayt First Nation and the Coast Salish people. Welcome, everyone. We're going to start with just an adoption of the agenda. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And approval of our minutes from our July 25th meeting. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have three public delegates this morning, and I'd like to invite our first public delegate up, Isabelle Kolick.
Hello. Oh, here it goes. Okay. Hi, everybody. I see a couple of familiar faces. I'm Isabelle Kolick, Executive Director with the Heights Merchants Association, BIA. I represent more than 300 businesses and their 2,000 employees of our North Burnaby community. We create many great local jobs in a vibrant, walkable neighborhood that's easily accessible by multiple transportation modes. We are the heart of a fantastic neighborhood of more than 10,000 residents. Our 12-block district is located along Hastings Street, a major thoroughfare in the region. For 100 years, these 12 blocks have served as our community street, where we stop and talk to neighbors, where merchants sweep the sidewalks and say hello and good morning, where shoppers tie up their dogs at the lampposts and parents push their babies in strollers. In 1996, our community was forced to accept an HOV lane, a moving curbside lane of traffic in our neighborhood. We lost our pedestrian friendliness and succumbed to flying debris, the danger of moving vehicles, and more than 80 decibels of noise every rush hour. We lost 50% of prime street parking during the busiest shopping period of the day, 5 days a week for the last 23 years. The argument in the 1990s was that, more than 44,000 vehicles use Hastings Street each day, and traffic engineers wanted to keep traffic moving faster. Do you know how many vehicles use Hastings Street today? It's not more. It's a lot fewer than in the 1996. Thanks to West Coast Express, the Millennium SkyTrain, Highway 1 expansion, and Evergreen Line, the number of vehicles on Hastings ranges today from 25,000 to 34,000 cars a day. That's a decrease of 25 to 33% from the car-centric 1990s. Many of you understand that small business owners today face many pressures: competition from big box stores, online shopping, high rents, high property taxes, MSP, higher minimum wages every year, and on top of all this, to take away their prime street front parking and impose an unfriendly pedestrian and shopping environment is completely detrimental to the kinds of multifaceted communities regional leaders such as yourselves profess to support. Having moving lanes of traffic next to a curbside changes a pleasant pedestrian sidewalk to a freeway atmosphere, making sidewalks noisy, dangerous, and dirty. If ever Hastings needed 5 lanes of moving traffic at all times, it's certainly not needed today, as people have other transportation choices and Hastings traffic volume is substantially decreased. So today, I come before you to ask you to try to understand our situation and the kind of community Main Street that we desire to have. Our merchants are asking to have our parking and pedestrian friendliness restored to how it was for nearly 80 or 90 years before 1996. And we ask that TransLink exempt the 12-block Burnaby Heights portion of Hastings Street from any assignment or any contemplation of a dedicated bus lane at curbside. That's all I have to say, my 3 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Isabelle. Really appreciate you coming and speaking and bringing that issue up to us here.
You're very welcome.
We're going to move to our next speaker, Roderick Lewis.
No No timer today, Mike Buddha? Good job. Brought my own just in case.
15 seconds is up.
Good morning. I hope that all of you have my materials in front of you. I'm here to request that there will be a motion passed today by the Council that would require a letter is sent from the Mayor's Council to British Columbia's Passenger Transportation Board that would be requesting that the board's operational policy, which is license criteria for ride-hailing companies in BC, would be withdrawn, and that the board would embark upon a public consultation that would involve solicitation of views from all municipalities across the province of BC, police services, public bodies, and especially groups that represent the persons with disabilities. If such a motion was passed by you today, that would be one way of making up for what is blatant negligence, I would say, on all of your behalf, other than Kennedy Stewart, who's not here today, insofar as that not a single city in Metro Vancouver made submissions to the Select Standing Committee on Crown Corporations in 2018-2019 when they were involved, when they were facilitating a 6-month inquiry as to what the conditions should be for ride-hailing companies' licenses. Why is this needed? Well, in large part because the Transportation Board has allowed a virtually unregulated license regime for ride-hailing companies that will allow ride-hailing companies to get away with the problems that they've created in other parts of North America and around the world, which have led to huge amounts of litigation, lawsuits from aggrieved citizens, and especially from groups that represent the disabled. Your timer's not visible, Mike. Ride-hailing companies should be required to, at the very bare minimum, accommodate persons with disabilities to the same extent that taxi companies in British Columbia are. In other jurisdictions in North America, such as New York, the cities have sued Uber and Lyft in order to prevent them from having unlimited numbers of vehicles on the roads. I say that your job as representatives of your cities on this board is to ensure that ride-hailing does not negatively impact Greater Vancouver and the province of BC as it has in other jurisdictions. California, as some of you may know if you've read my emails, just last week passed a law that requires Uber and Lyft to treat their drivers as employees. This is something that British Columbia should have done before the operational policy for ride-hailing companies was released by the Transportation Board. So pass a motion today and request that the Passenger Transportation Board would revoke its policy for licensing ride-hailing companies and request that the Passenger Transportation Board would embark upon a comprehensive public consultation. Any questions?
Okay, well, thank you very much for your delegation this morning. Our next speaker is Tim Collings.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. My name is Tim Collings. I'm a Surrey resident, and I feel like I'm in old territory. I used to teach engineering up the hill at Simon Fraser, and I, in the late 90s, went over and started the Technical University of BC, which is now the campus of SFU. I'm a local entrepreneur in the city of Surrey and was appointed to the Order of BC in 2015. This morning, I'd like to speak to you about an idea that's actually been piloted in Surrey. The decline in walking and cycling is closely related to increasing car use, as you well know, and congestion. Today, just 1 in 6 Canadians meets the recommended physical activity guidelines, and this costs our healthcare system $80 billion every single year. Vehicle costs are second highest household expense next to shelter, if you can believe it, even higher than food costs. And transportation-related emissions comprise 28% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. As you well know, we must improve how we get around the Lower Mainland, and this presents a remarkable opportunity to engage the public in solving three simultaneous crises: congestion, healthcare, and climate change. Considering these three issues, I started actually a little skunkworks project about 3 years ago and created an app that measures our personal driving, our personal cycling and walking, and it prices the fully loaded daily costs associated with physical inactivity and every car trip that we take. In 2016, conducted a two-month pilot study in South Surrey to attempt to nudge behavior. Participants were asked to replace short vehicle trips by walking or cycling, and when I say short, I mean 15 minutes or less. In fact, 1 out of 5 car trips is less than 1 kilometer, if you can believe it. And longer trips, they were asked to replace, if possible, by transit. And participants reduced their driving, on average, over an 8-week period by 28%, delivering $3,000 in personal vehicle cost savings, $2,000 in societal benefits, and $1,000 in additional transit revenues on an annualized basis. So today I'm asking the Mayor's Council to support a longer-term pilot study to educate and bring awareness to British Columbians regarding vehicle and physical inactivity costs in an effort to alleviate congestion, rising healthcare costs, and climate change. You have received a 2-page summary of the technology and pilot study, which I hope you will read, and I look very much forward to any next steps you might have to offer. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining and your presentation today. We do have a report on our agenda today on TransLink Tomorrow, which doesn't speak to your particular project, but does show that TransLink is certainly interested in looking at pilots that kind of really look at some of the new mobility and new technologies to kind of better shape things. So we'll certainly receive that information and have our TransLink staff have a look at it. Thank you. Okay, so that completes our open delegations. We're next moving to the reports that come from our New Mobility Committee. The first is 3.1, which is an update on the Transport 2050 engagement activities.
Okay, good morning everyone. I just wanted to give you a quick update on how we've been doing on our engagement on T2050. As you know, like a very, very, very significant exercise. We've wanted this to be the largest engagement we've ever done as an organization in our region, and we're well on our way to doing that. When we started on this process, we really were aiming to take what is, a relatively dry consultation exercise and really turn it into something that people could feel part of and engaged in. And so we really wanted to go beyond the experts, reach out to the general public, reach out throughout the region, get people interested by asking fun, provocative questions, be very engaging, make it a unique experience so that they remembered they participated in it, and be really visible. We wanted to give people a lot of opportunities to participate, whether it's in person or online. We've been throughout the region. I believe we visited every community in the region. I say I believe because there might be one or two that we haven't quite got to yet. But we've really tried to make this a really extensive effort. Our most visible activity was at the PNE this year. We decided that the PNE would be a really good way for us to reach a lot of people that traditionally don't get involved in these exercises. And I'm hoping that you had a chance to see what we did there. We think we were pretty excited by what we did. If you were there, you had a chance to see the MicroCity 3D map that we put out there. We had virtual reality demonstrating what some of the future could look like. We had multiple opportunities to take our survey. We also had our new double-decker buses and rapid bus models out there there were lineups to go through the double-deckers throughout the fair. And we thought it was a really good exercise. We had a lot of partners. We had people trying e-scooters out. So we tried to make this a really engaging exercise, and I really do hope you had a chance to go through it. In terms of the numbers, we think that we really were able to use the PNE to get to a lot of people. We had over 150,000 people go through the exhibition. We had 3,000 people a day go through our engagement bus, and we had 2,000 ideas submitted as part of that process at the PNE alone. Just to put that in perspective, on our online platform, we've had 2,000 ideas submitted through the entire period. So we doubled the number of ideas that we received. So we think it was a really good success, and we think that we've gotten some very, very good feedback from a broad cross-section of the public over the last, especially over the last few weeks. Now, in terms of next steps, we are wrapping up phase 1, so you have 2 more days to get surveys in, ideas in. We've been pushing that deadline out to the public just to remind them that Sunday is kind of the last day for this phase 1 for input. We then, later this fall, will be releasing a phase 1 report, which gives you an idea of what we've heard from the public. You'll be seeing that at the next Mayor's Council meeting in November, the November Mayor's Council meeting. And then we're into phase 2, when we're doing a deeper dive into a number of topics. So with that, I'm just going to wrap up with just a plea. If you can have anybody out there who hasn't had a chance to participate, Sunday's the last day of this first phase, and we really want to get those numbers up. The numbers are looking really good right now. We're in the mid 20,000 range in terms of survey responses, which is really, really good. But we really want to get everyone to have a chance to have their say.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Stewart.
Thank you, and I won't. You probably won't hear it again, Mr. Vanagas, but that was an incredibly good job that you. I'll say it again about your team, though. That I was blown away by the outreach at the PNE and at various other events. That was outstanding. I think we TransLink showed that it can reach out and get the public's confidence that we're actually asking. So I truly appreciate it.
Please go on if you want to.
And you won't hear that again.
Are there any other questions or comments from the body? Well, thanks for the presentation. I think the engagement on the first phase of Transport 2050 has been probably one of the more aggressive and reaches a lot of people in the region. And real hats off to all the staff involved in doing that. I know we've connected with a lot of people and a lot of people that don't traditionally connect through our engagement processes, so that's been really successful. I had an opportunity to go in the PNE. Unfortunately, it was so busy there. I really wanted to get on the double-decker buses, but there was no way my daughter was going to let me stand in the lineup that was to get there. So good work on that. So this is a motion, a report for information. If I can get a motion for receipt. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next, we have a report on micromobility services and planning guidelines.
Thank you. You have in your report in front of you the actual guidelines document that has been just released publicly. It's on our website and been shared with all of your staff. We just wanted to walk through the document, its purpose, and what some of the key elements are for your benefit here today. The work really emerged out of some funding that was enabled in the Phase 1 investment plan that created a new program under the banner of New Mobility. It's in the next report you see there's a number of pilots or prototypes underway, experiments that funding has enabled. Some of that funding has also helped do some policy and guidelines work. So this product is a result of that. In general, shared micromobility, we used that term to refer to the use of bikes or scooters or other low-speed modes. You know, the number of devices out there is rapidly evolving, and there's always some kind of new thing around the corner. In the last few years, this has really exploded in cities around the world. You're familiar with the Mobi bike share in Vancouver. That's a station-based system. Those systems have been around for about a decade or so. But in the last 2 years, thanks to smartphones and GPS costs coming down, the advent of dockless systems, so dockless bikes or scooters that you can sort of access anywhere through a smartphone app and drop off anywhere else, have been proliferating. You can see the chart there shows the growth of services in cities in the U.S., with dockless scooters really leading the way in the last year, just taking off in numbers pretty dramatically. Now, there are a number of benefits we see for these sorts of services. They really do improve access to mobility for more residents in more parts of the region, physical activity, they're, for the most part, lower emissions. And we do know from some recent research that they're actually very good at connecting people last mile to transit, including bus services, not just to rapid transit. There are challenges, though, that a lot of cities have seen. Those include parking bikes and scooters in ways that block the public right-of-way, or especially in busy areas around transit stops and stations. That's especially problematic for people traveling on foot with strollers or people with disabilities. There's a lot of cases of theft and vandalism. They're easy to pick up and move and throw in the river. The durability of the quality of the vehicles has been questioned. Their lifespan is not all that long. They end up lasting for only a couple months, so there's this sort of a cost life cycle emissions challenge. There's the question of getting good data from the company so that we're actually able as cities to manage the systems. So to be able to leverage all of those benefits and address some of those challenges, staff at the Regional Transportation Advisory Committee asked TransLink to take a leadership role in providing some guidelines to manage some of those issues. So the guidelines in the report you see in front of you have 6 key areas: data sharing, payments and price structures, system planning and design, right-of-way management, system operations, and permit structure and conditions. The idea with the guidelines, they're non-binding. They're advice to municipalities as they're deploying systems. They're intended to be a living document. We'll be updating them on a regular basis based on lessons learned in the region. There's a dockless bike share pilot at UBC was the first to get off the ground. There's one active in Richmond. A number of communities are exploring right now ways to get these systems on the ground in our region. The thinking is that this is a first step, these guidelines, to provide a more regionally consistent approach, but that as we evolve, there could be some interest, and there was interest expressed at the Joint New Mobility Committee in looking at ways to take even more of a regionally coordinated approach, so that we can potentially, in some communities that maybe don't have the capacity to do the legwork to invite these systems into their communities, we might be able to provide there might be a way to provide some support at a regional scale to improve the attractiveness of the market and reduce the barrier to entry for smaller communities. So with that, I'll turn it back to the chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Mayor Morden.
Thank you. I just thought some high-level comments from the committee would be useful. So thank you, Andrew, for that presentation to sort of give you a bit of a brief outline. For somebody that just went to Paris and experienced what the Wild West might look like, I think that the approach that's being taken here is going to be helpful for everybody to provide some sort of a regional look at this to ensure we've got consistency as well as some guidance, but not necessarily to tell us the how. So, there's a balance there, and I think the approach makes sense. There was some very interesting discussion at the committee and a lot of interest in making sure that we explore this subject well, because as much as there's a lot of demand for this service to start, and everybody's receiving that pressure and billions of emails in the last week alone just on pressure to bring about ride sharing and all of these micro mobility options. So I think it's prudent to walk as opposed to jump. I think, and that's the approach that I think the committee, that was the general sense I heard at the table, was that we need to be cautious about this, because after 10 years of this being out there, we have a great chance here to get it right, because there's a lot of other things that people don't consider when you just simply want to start something and then you're not going to get it right. So I think the approach is right, so just leave those comments out there, and thanks to staff for sort of taking a look at it. The committee also, we heard from David Zipper, who is a very interesting presenter on this. Got a lot of very interesting and colorful views on what ride sharing could look like and what it should look like, and his experiences with it. And he's all over the place. You can Google him up, and instantly he's kind of the go-to guy on this. So, highly recommend you take a look at, see what he has to say. Some of the other members of the committee can maybe make some comments on that, but I actually really enjoyed his sort of look at things. Certainly a lot of experience and knowledge, and he's there to assist TransLink and as well as us to make sure that we make good decisions.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Oh, Mayor Buchanan.
Thank you very much for the information. I'm just curious, because I agree, I think it's a great start in terms of a framework for us in each municipality, and I think it would be wise of us to look at how we can actually do this at a regional wide level with some local contexts for each of us. I'm just curious, in the assessment or the analysis between cities, is there any comparison of those cities that did dockless versus docked? Because my biggest concern is some of the challenges that you've identified in terms of the right-of-way, the public realm in particular, people in our community who use our streets and have disabilities, and more so, not just from a mobility perspective, but the visually impaired and the impact that would have. And I too have been to several cities, a lot in the United States, where they have these, and they are just like everywhere in the public realm, which would be, I think, quite hazardous to those who have more vulnerable issues.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think that was one of the key issues that that staff that were working on this were focusing on. And I think in general, the cities that have implemented dockless early, that was the key challenge that they saw in those early years of deployment. And now some places are requiring or incentivizing, depending on how strongly you want to act, for those, even if they're dockless bikes or scooters, that they be required to be parked in a certain designated zone, you know, a painted sort of parking corral. UBC, after deploying, you know, initially, I think, didn't require those, and then was incentivizing users to return vehicles to that special zone. The other key thing is making sure that we get good data. It's important to get real-time granular data so that as the agency managing these systems, you know in real time, or your staff know in real time, especially enforcement staff, if there is a vehicle that's parked where it's not supposed to be, and if it's tipped over, blocking the right-of-way, someone can go immediately out and address that issue. So there is a trade-off. The docked systems do obviously manage the right-of-way more effectively, but they're more expensive and heavier infrastructure to implement. So that's sort of the trade-off that these systems are exploring today. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Okay. Well, really appreciate the report. You know, I think the trends growing worldwide with micromobility, we need to make sure we're staying on top of it. No doubt. These services can provide some transportation benefits, but they also have some pitfalls in the communities, as are kind of highlighted in the report. I think the most shocking thing that came out of the report to me is just seeing how the scooters in 1 year have almost overtaken the bike share programs in just 1 year of really being implemented, which shows that's having a big impact there. But I think particularly from someone coming from a smaller municipality in Metro Vancouver, these kind of guidelines I think are really helpful, and I think will do the region well to make sure we're applying a more consistent approach to the opportunities and challenges that we're going to face. Director McCutcheon?
Thanks. I just had a quick question on the scooter piece. I also was quite blown away by that. Are those sort of foot pedaled, or do they include ones with motors?
These are pretty much exclusively e-scooters. So yeah, that travel generally by the manufacturer allows them to travel 30 kilometers an hour. You can put regulators in them to require them to travel at lower speeds, but yeah, they're all e-scooters.
Okay, so this is a report for information at this point. Look to the body. Seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Our next report, 3.3, a report on TransLink tomorrow. I don't think we have a presentation on this one, but we'll open up the body if there's any questions or comments regarding this report on some of the pilot projects TransLink has been working on. Okay, not seeing any. If I can get a motion for receipt. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, moving to some unfinished business from our last meeting. We've got an update on the Rapid Bus program.
Thank you, Chair. With me momentarily is Daniel Freeman, who is the Senior Manager in charge of the Rapid Bus and Bus Speed and Reliability programs. We brought this forward in July. We continue to evolve and get ready for launch. So Dan will give you an overview of where we're at, including some recent developments on this. We're super excited, and the launch is just around the corner for the initial phase of these, and planning is commencing for the next round as well. So I'll turn it over to Dan. Sorry.
Good morning. As Jeff mentioned, this presentation was initially to be presented in July, and I think some of the information since then you've heard. So I'll walk through this reasonably quickly for the committee and leave time for questions if there are any. So again, the presentation and report describe the status of the program and the updates since we last came here. Most significantly, there are some important updates that I guess now have since happened in terms of our branding and public launch of the brand, which we're really excited about. And then also significant construction activities have commenced and are well underway. So there's a lot out on the road. For those of you in your communities who have rapid buses coming, you've probably seen some of that yourselves already, and we're very happy about how that's progressing. For recap, I think the council is well aware of the scope of the program in the vision, which outlines a dozen corridors to be developed. We are currently in the midst of launching the first wave of those. The important changes that have occurred through direction from this body as well as from municipal councils is the initial Mayor's Council identified Fraser Highway as a rapid bus corridor, and based on the direction last December, that was those funds were redirected to upgrade the 104th King George service instead, given the direction on rapid transit. We have still continued to work with Surrey and Langley on improvements to bus services in the interim on that corridor, given how critical it is to transit in the region. And as well, at the direction of West Vancouver Council, we have changed the terminus of the Marine Drive rapid bus to terminate at Park Royal for this time until pending additional direction from West Vancouver. We have been targeting January 2020 for launch, and that is on track for all but one of the corridors, and I'll speak further to that. The Marine Drive corridor that I mentioned poses some additional complexity from a constructability perspective, and we've been encountering so our contractors have been encountering some utility conflicts and other structural conflicts as they've been progressing, which puts the launch further into the spring of 2020. Like at this stage, February or April is what's looking likely, but we're making good progress on that front. And all other corridors are still on track for January launch. So again, this is now old news for you, but we have undertaken a significant rebranding effort to really highlight the big investments that the region's making in improved bus services and on these corridors. So the Rapid Bus brand is now one that we're going to be placing on all of these services, which highlights the distinct nature and the kind of higher order of transit that customers can come to expect. And of course, as many of you just heard, we revealed the new buses and their look to many smiling faces and kids, including mine, who climbed all over them at the PNE not too long ago. And so there'll be more public outreach and communications happening through the fall and as we get closer to launch, as we help to build excitement and build ridership on these services. So again, these are the routes of the 2 upgraded and 3 new corridors that are launching in 2020. And then, as Jeff mentioned, we are initiating the planning efforts for the 2 additional corridors that have been funded through the Phase 2 investment plan. Again, this is the attributes of the service: frequency, speed and reliability, branding, and amenities at stops, and really bringing those attributes that again customers expect from our rail rapid transit system to the bus service to really elevate the level of service that they can expect at stops and on vehicles. And one of the important attributes that again was shown at the PNE are these new rapid bus posts that are going to be installed. We're trying to take delivery of them. This is a photo of a prototype, but they're going to start being installed on streets starting next month. And these are going to be to all of the rapid bus stops, and they will have, again, real-time information and more visibility for our customers, as well as tactile information. You can see one of our staff members, Richard, there's an information button that you can press that reads out the real-time information for customers who have visual impairments or low mobility. And so that's a really important attribute that you'll start to see on city streets. And so as I was mentioning, construction is progressing across all the corridors, and those of you out on the road and our customers are already starting to see some of the benefits of those. All that construction is particularly, so I'll mention the Marine Drive. There is bus lanes and widenings occurring on 3rd Street right now, and a lot of the paving has commenced. And however, due to some of the more complex utility conflicts that we've been encountering, about 70 of the sites that the contractors excavated, they found utility conflicts that weren't previously identified. Which is something that happens frequently when working in confined urban environments. I'm sure many of you experience this on municipal projects. In addition, there's a lot of other construction activity happening on this busy corridor that we're trying to work in close coordination with that constrains some of the construction. So right now, the launch timing is anticipated to be February or April 2020. On the Lougheed corridor, we have construction that's been progressing primarily from west to east, so substantial works at Quitlam Central Station that will provide a new access and egress into the loop that will save a tremendous amount of time for all bus passengers traveling into and out of Quitlam Central, not only in the rapid bus. That work is substantially complete, as well as some additional bus priority in Coquitlam, moving into Port Coquitlam. There's been some work along in Pitt Meadows, some line eradication has taken place, and you'll continue to see the rest of the works on this corridor completed through October and November. And then lastly, on 41st Avenue, we have bus lanes out at UBC and Westbrook that have already been completed, and our bus passengers are already benefiting from those. Some of the parking restrictions and signage changes along 41st have also already occurred, and again, we're already starting to see some benefits to our bus passengers, and additional line painting and signage and so forth will occur through the coming months. So, as I mentioned, we did a lot of public announcement and marketing, and that pushes and continue through launch, as well as after launch. I think we really want to make a big effort in your communities to do a lot of ridership development and build understanding of these new transit options to help achieve the goals that the region has set out in terms of attracting more people to transit. And lastly, we're now initiating work on the next two corridors, Newton to Scott Road, which is one of the busiest routes in the region, as well as Richmond to Expo Line. And so those processes are getting underway, starting with staff, and we'll be engaging with the communities shortly thereafter. In addition, we're initiating a cost share program, which was enabled by the mayor's by the Phase 2 investment plan, which provides an additional $6 million a year cost share for upgrades to any of these Phase 1 and Phase 2 corridors for further improvements to bus priority as well as to passenger environments. So that's something that we are developing right now, and we'll be coming back to provide an update on.
I'd just like to add one thing on the bus speed and reliability. These measures, we're really encouraged by the work we've done with the municipal staff on these projects to be able to identify a variety of methods for improving the reliability for all passengers. We're going to come forward to you later this fall with our first annual bus speed and reliability report, looking at all of the corridors and what are the possible measures that we can do to improve the speed, accessing some of those funds that you enabled through the previous investment plans to improve the environment for all of our passengers. So this is a key focus for us as we see congestion on the roads increasing and reliability in many areas degrading. We can really help through this collaborative approach.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll open it up. Mayor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and a very exciting project, especially for us in Delta, especially my people that are in North Delta. Mr. Chair, I was wondering if the identifier for this project states right now a new route from Newton to Scott Road Station. If it could be changed to a new route from Newton/North Delta to the Scott Road Station, I appreciate having identified that as part of North Delta too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I'm sure that can be accommodated, and certainly, obviously, that'll be a huge benefit to the North Delta community, and we want them to be aware that the service is coming.
Yes.
Mayor Froese.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. The redirection of the rapid bus from Fraser Highway in preparation for SkyTrain coming down Fraser Highway and putting adequate transportation along King George 104. With that happening, and you mentioned that there are some enhancements will be occurring along Fraser Highway, can you provide a little more detail on what that looks like and how that'll keep up with anticipated increased ridership prior to SkyTrain?
Yes, absolutely. So there are two things that that we've been doing on Fraser Highway. The first that's actually occurred already has been changes to and improvements to bus services. So just after Labor Day, we made changes to the 502 and 503 services to introduce what we call, Beeline Light, express service on the 503, which has already shown to be it's early days still, but initial results seem to show some really positive trends in terms of ridership on that corridor by increasing just the capacity and providing additional express limited stop service for folks who are making those long trips. In addition, we've been working with Surrey and Delta staff on making low-cost transit priority improvements on the corridor that would be cost-effective but would help with the speed and reliability in the interim. And so those are likely to be constructed through October and November, pending weather, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Buchanan.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm just going to pull this closer. Thank you. And thank you very much for the update. Very much appreciated. I certainly, I share, as Director Harvey said, the excitement in terms of the Beeline that's coming to the North Shore. And I certainly think the branding and the new buses and the new posts certainly make it much more up to date and I think what people expect from a modern public transportation system. So that's been great. And I just really want to commend the collaboration that has occurred between the TransLink staff and our staff. We have a significant amount of infrastructure work happening across the North Shore, and particularly within the city, my city, it's been ongoing, and I know the timeline has shifted slightly, but I'd rather get it right and get it moving as efficiently as it can, as opposed to rushing it and having it perhaps not perfect. That I can live with. I am curious though, so this is of course part of the phase 2, and so the North Shore is looking to get 2 more Beelines in the 5 that are supposed to be coming in phase 3. So I'm just curious what it's going to take to get us those 5 new Beelines in the phase 3.
So Mayor Buchanan, earlier this year, the Mayor's Council and Board passed resolutions for us to accelerate the development of phase 3. There are, as you point out, there are 5 remaining Beelines that have not been funded yet through the first 2 phases. So those would be candidates for a phase 3 investment plan. We can't do them all at once. It takes several years, even if they were turned on, say next year is the target for an investment plan. It takes a couple of years, 2 to 3 years, to work with the communities, identify the right corridor, and all those interventions, get fleet, those kinds of things. So that is our goal, that the new investment plan, if something is passed by mid next year, that it would start instigating services as early as 2022. Right now, the last year of sort of funded services is through expansion for bus is through 2021, maybe into early 2022. So we would be looking at that piece. Per your specific question as it relates to the North Shore Beelines, we are looking at a precursor.
Not just the North Shore, all of them. But.
Okay. So the precursor, though, to that is the express service that we are going to launch probably next spring over Second Narrows Bridge along Willingdon. So that will start the planning, if you will, in building ridership.
So My question, thank you, in terms of for the North Shore, but it really is about the 5. So in phase 3,
Yep.
we want to see 5 more coming forward and understanding the process, which is multiple years. What's it going to take in terms of that funding piece from not just us at a municipal level, but at those other senior levels of government so that we can actually start moving this process sooner than later?
Yeah. So each rapid bus line is slightly different, and so we haven't done all the planning to know exactly how many incremental bus service hours would be required once we get into it. But just as a rule of thumb, if you will, at the current ones, it's roughly about $5 million a year for a rapid bus line for each new one from an operating perspective. In addition to that, we've been putting somewhere on the order of 20 to 30 million in capital just for the infrastructure on the road, and that has been cost shared with senior governments in the phase 2 plan. So we will also be looking for that. The fleet have been purchased through the Greater Vancouver Regional Fund, administered by Metro Vancouver. So that provides 90% of the funding. Through the phase 2 plan, we are getting close to our full allocation of that. So we'll have to be looking at the timing and in that regards if we'll require additional senior government funding beyond the capacity there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
We talk a lot about new mobility, but I'd like to talk about old mobility for a second, and namely double-decker buses. Mayor Cote mentioned the double-decker buses' popularity at the PNE, and I've had the same feedback from people in my community and even people throughout the region that I've talked to. And I think reliability and frequency and all those tangible things are important, but intangibles are also so important when it comes to transit use. The emotional experience. And when I talk to people who don't take transit and I ask them the reason, they talk about convenience, but a lot of them just say they don't like the feeling of being on the bus. But paradoxically and somewhat irrationally, people seem to love double-decker buses. That's my impression. And I've had people say in West Vancouver with a straight face that we didn't like the B line as articulated buses, but we really would like double-decker buses, which makes no sense. But I don't care why they want transit or why ridership will increase. I only care really that they want transit or that they will increase ridership. So is TransLink studying this or noticing this phenomenon? And if so, or second, more importantly, are there any plans to increase or introduce more double-decker buses on the rapid bus routes or throughout the system?
Councillor Cameron, that's a good question. So it's one of the reasons why we're very excited to be introducing double-decker buses, as we know people's perceptions and there are comfort pluses to that, having more seated facilities on a bus compared to an articulated is helpful, and it's especially helpful for longer trips, which is why we're putting them on the longer express routes as a starting point, which is where they're often deployed to in other areas like BC Transit in Victoria, et cetera. So we want to get more experience with that and see what our customers like and how they work as far as loading and unloading passengers. There are trade-offs, and that's one of the benefits of articulated 60-foot buses in very busy corridors is just the ability to move passengers in and out of the vehicle quicker. So that's the kind of trade-off that we'll be looking at and see how that experience is here as far as how much dwell time you have at stops, et cetera. That said, our buses, it can be complicated if you're adding too many different types of buses to different facilities, and you need to be able to maintain them, et cetera. So it'll be a longer-term examination. Our fleet right now lasts about 15 years, so when we bring in an articulated bus, we want to make sure we get the most out of it.
Okay, well, really appreciate the update on the Rapid Bus program. I know this is a big component of the Mayor's 10-year plan, and it's really nice to see it now starting to kind of roll out and will continue to roll out in upcoming years. I think we spend a lot of time around this table and a lot of time in the region talking about rapid transit projects, and no doubt that's an important part of our transit system. But the reality is, more than 60% of our transit users are using the bus, and creating efficient, effective, and more comfortable bus experience, I think, is a huge opportunity we want to do. And I think this rapid bus program really speaks to that. The one question I had, and this is probably a Transport 2050 question, but really I see rapid bus as kind of a step along the line to kind of further enhancing either getting towards rapid transit or even the next level of bus rapid transit. But how do you see that, that evolution of these rapid transit lines kind of getting to that next level, and what are the key components to kind of take rapid bus to the next level?
Maybe I'll start and Dan can pitch in. We would like to, as part of this program, develop a long-term vision of how do you evolve these over time when the environment is right. And these are, as you mentioned, these are very sort of BRT, bus rapid transit light approaches. The idea of even the matching fund gives us the opportunity, if a service is working well and the communities are amenable, and the Ministry of Transportation in many cases is an active partner, we can gradually improve them by providing more dedicated right-of-way, more priority, and bring them up to that standard. That said, at this point, what we had identified in the Mayor's vision is not of that scale from an infrastructure perspective, where you might be spending hundreds of millions of dollars for dedicated right-of-way versus the 20 to 30 to 40 that we're talking about now. That's an idea that's coming forward that we're starting to look at, and we'll look at in the networks for the Transport 2050. But we need to be thinking near term, and maybe Dan can speak to some of the additional amenities that we'd like to introduce.
Thanks. I think it's a really important question. I think it's one that kind of gets at, you mentioned not only the number of our passengers, transit passengers and users in our region who rely on bus service, but also the ability to deliver improvements to them quickly, and given the long length of time it takes for the planning, development, and construction of our really equally critical rail or other rapid transit infrastructure projects. We're really interested in making improvements incrementally to bus priorities, so that we can extend either the extent or time of day of bus priority on busy corridors that benefit not only as rapid bus routes, but in most cases these are the busiest bus corridors in the region that also serve a large number of other bus routes. So we want to see those benefits continue to grow, and so that's the cost share program can help to fund some of those further improvements. At the same time, we also know, I think to the point that Councillor Cameron was making around the customer experience and perception, how that influences people's transit usages, that the experience waiting for transit is also very important. And so currently we are installing rapid bus posts that really step up in a really significant way the amount of amenities that our customers can have, and change some of the perception of bus service for those who don't use it very frequently or haven't used it in a long time, and still think that it's the word bus taped to a post and not knowing where that is, and the kind of the uncertainty and waiting out in the rain. And so what we'd like to do also is make further investments in with all of you in the passenger experience at stops. We recognize that's municipal right of way, and so we'll have to work with all of the different agencies on how to accomplish that. But more substantial shelters and waiting environments, improved customer information, bigger and larger screens in the future, and so forth, and potentially. Some other agencies have fare payment and so forth. So there are lots of other improvements that we'd like to be able to make to bring bus service along further and further to attract more customers.
Okay, well, wonderful. I think as we launch Rapid Bus in 2020, I think we've got a huge opportunity to kind of really improve the customer experience and improve kind of even perceptions out there, because we're getting into a lot of areas that traditionally haven't seen high quality bus service, and I think that's going to be really important to get the region thinking a little bit differently about how bus service can be a big part of as we move forward in the region's transportation plan. So thank you very much. Okay, so this was a report for information.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, moving on to Transport 2050 Transportation Network Concept Design. I don't think we don't have a presentation here, but staff are available for questions if there are any questions or comments. Seeing none, if I, Mayor Hurley.
Yeah, you know, as we move forward, I'm noticing that we're taking very aggressive steps in many places on emission control around climate change issues, and I'm concerned that we just seem to be dipping our toe in the alternative fuel with TransLink when I compare us to other transportation systems. And if we're really serious about meeting the targets that are being set, I think we have to get really aggressive moving towards alternate fuels. And by that I don't mean hybrids, I mean electric buses. And we have taken in my view, an approach that is not very aggressive in moving towards the electrification of buses. And so I would like to just make that point that you know, we really have a solid look. I know it's much more money, but at the same time, I think we really need to aggressively start going down that road.
We appreciate the sentiment, Mayor Hurley. Earlier this year, or actually late last year, we adopted the Mayor's Council and the Board adopted the new, more aggressive targets to us to move to complete 100% renewable fuels. And so we've been working on a low carbon fleet strategy that we will be bringing back later this fall. Having that mandate from the Mayor's Council is important. It wasn't something that had been identified explicitly in the Mayor's vision, so we now see that as a new mandate that comes forward for even in the Phase 3 investment plan. While we may be going sort of slowly and incrementally right now, we're coming to a major inflection point for us in the next couple of years where a good majority of our buses will be coming forward for renewal and replacement. And it's important to know what we're going to do with those, as I mentioned earlier, since they last 15 to 17 years. So we're preparing options. It will require additional upfront money, as you pointed out. And so working with the council, working with the province and the federal government on how we may do that to accelerate and not lose that opportunity early on. It's not just about the buses, obviously. It's about our infrastructure, about our fleets, about en route charging, all of those kinds of elements.